Ukraine is literally the world expert on drone technology. They have spent billions on creating their own drones as well as benefiting from foreign ones. They've adapted, they've modified, they've extended the range of and the accuracy of these drones. And I think Britain would be very wise, and in fact other NATO countries, to benefit from what they have learned. And if he wants to build a factory in this country, well, that's another matter. But I think it would be very wise for Britain to share everything and benefit from their experience.
Now, this time every Monday on Hugo's programme, we have a look at the big foreign policy and diplomatic and defence stories of the moment. And we are joined by Michael Evans, the Times former defence editor, to discuss lots that's going on actually this morning. Hello, Michael.
Hello, good morning.
It's very good to welcome you to the programme. Let's start with the visit of President Zelenskyy to visit Andy Burnham here in the UK today. The government says the visit is a clear signal that Britain's support for Ukraine remains as strong as ever. And so I suppose my question is, will Andy Burnham continue the legacy of the previous Prime Ministers that Zelensky's had to deal with? Indeed, Andy Burnham's the fifth British PM since the all-out war, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Has there been a continuity of support across those five PMs?
Well, the wonderful thing for President Zelenskyy is that we've had five different prime ministers, both parties, of course, Conservative and Labour, and the one thing that literally they all share is support for Ukraine. So I think Zelenskyy will be very happy to arrive at number 10, and he will be given the usual welcome. And I think Andy Burnham has already made it clear that he is, as they like to say, shoulder to shoulder in support of Ukraine. And what's more, I think there'll be at least one announcement, which is supplying, or not supplying, they're already supplying it, but it's a special piece of kit which helps to drones to survive jamming by the Russians. They've already got the missile, the device, but they're going to get the intellectual property rights to it, so they can build it themselves. It's called Stone Cloak. So I think Zelenskyy will be very happy and pleased, and Andy Burnham will do the usual thing and say that Britain is, foursquare behind Ukraine.
Zelensky's posted on X this morning, "I want to build a big factory in Britain based on new technologies and share them with our partners. We're ready to share all our experience with the UK. I hope that the UK will do the same." There is something in that that struck me as interesting, which is there is a kind of mutual benefit to be exploited, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't think that actually, while we see it as a one-way street of offering support to Ukraine, well, there's Zelenskyy saying there's lots you can learn from us at a time when defence spending is very much in the spotlight of this new administration.
And also, of course, the defence investment plan, which was announced a week or so back, very much focused on drone warfare. Now that's the big thing, has been for some time. And of course, Ukraine is literally the world expert on drone technology. They have spent billions on creating their own drones as well as benefiting from foreign ones. They've adapted, they've modified, they've extended the range of and the accuracy of these drones. And I think Britain would be very wise, and in fact other NATO countries, to benefit from what they have learned. And if he wants to build a factory in this country, well, that's another matter. But I think it would be very wise for Britain to share everything and benefit from their experience.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Let's have a listen to Minister for Intergovernmental Relations, Hamish Faulkner, this morning on Times Radio Breakfast, saying that boosting defence spending is one of Andy Burnham's top priorities.
Andy Burnham has been absolutely clear. He thinks this is a real priority, and you can believe him in that, given that he appointed John Healey as Chancellor. So I am absolutely sure that the Prime Minister shares mine, the Defence Secretary's, the whole of the Labour Party's, and indeed the country's desire to make sure the defence gets the finance it deserves.
And notably on this as well, Michael, the new Defence Secretary, Wes Streeting, said that he'd resign if the Treasury doesn't fully fund the government's defence investment plan. There's thought to be a gap of around £5 billion. Now, those close to Mr Streeting have suggested that this isn't about him sort of storming out a week into this new brief that he's got, but rather to emphasise the point. It seems like more money is coming, doesn't it? From what we're hearing from the new Chancellor, John Healey, who of course quit over the lack of money, from Wes Streeting's comments, and from Andy Burnham's kind of rise to power, there is more money coming for defence, isn't there?
You would have thought that with John Healey as the Chancellor, it's almost guaranteed, we don't want him resigning again, it's almost guaranteed that he will provide the extra money. The big question is, where is it going to come from? I don't think Andy Burnham or John Healey or Wes Streeting has given any indication where this money is going to come from. It's about $5 billion extra that they need. That's a lot of money, and they will have to find this from either savings elsewhere or cuts in services. And we haven't seen yet what their plan may be. Also, there's supposedly a pledge to increase defence spending to 3.5% of GDP by 2035. Again, where is the money going to come from?
What's a sort of bigger signal on the world stage as to our intentions? Is it an announcement that spending will reach a certain level by a certain time? Or is it saying Ukraine is now building a factory in Britain in order that we can share experience and expertise? I don't know, maybe I'm pushing a sort of false dichotomy between the two, but one feels like numbers on a spreadsheet and the other feels quite real, I suppose.
I don't think we should, look at the requirements for this country's defence spending purely in terms of Ukraine. Obviously, the main thrust of the government defence investment plan is to, if you like, prove that we are still a major member of NATO, and to prove to the White House, perhaps more than anyone else, that we are in the business of proper defence spending. We're pretty low in terms of percentage of GDP. So I think Burnham is looking towards Mr. Trump, perhaps more than Mr. Zelenskyy.
Yeah. Shall we go on to something else that may crop up through the week this week? A meeting of potentially 40 nations in London, a conference with the US, with NATO allies, to discuss plans about reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Apparently this was discussed between our Defence Secretary Wes Streeting and Pete Hegseth, the US Secretary of War, as he likes to be known. The conference isn't yet confirmed. What would be your ambition for a conference such as this, Michael? Does it make sense to bring nations together and to have this sort of conversation about the Strait of Hormuz, which, as we are well aware, is critical the world over?
Well, first of all, we've had a meeting like this under Keir Starmer. In fact, he very much led the sort of coalition of countries, European countries, to talk about, the maritime responsibilities in the future when and if the Strait of Hormuz is no longer a part of a war scene. I think the subtle difference here is that Wes Streeting has rather cunningly invited Pete Hegseth and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane, to attend the conference. I think that's probably quite a clever move. It will aim to show the Americans that that Europe is prepared to play its part. But of course, the difficulty here is that Europe is not prepared to play its part in the war with Iran. It is prepared to play a part in trying to ensure the safety of shipping going through the Strait of Hormuz. It's a big difference. Trump recognizes the big difference. He's not happy about it. I can't see at the moment a big conference in London, however friendly and cooperative it is. I can't see it ending up with Britain and other members of the NATO countries going with warships to the Strait of Hormuz to join American warships in guarding shipping going through the Strait of Hormuz. I don't see that happening because currently, although at the moment there's a little bit of a respite, the war is very much still on.
There was conversation about the UK and France being a sort of critical part of clearing mines and things from the Strait of Hormuz, wasn't there, whenever the opportunity for that actually presents itself?
Yeah. Yeah, again, that's very much ready and waiting.
Yeah.
We both countries have got the correct equipment for doing that. I'm sure they could play a very significant part, but once again, they can't do it while Iran is firing missiles into the Strait of Hormuz.
And as part of all of this, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's Prime Minister, is heading to Washington for his first meeting with President Trump since the start of the conflict in February. From what we know of Trump and Netanyahu's relationship over these last few weeks and months during this time of conflict, they have gone hot and cold, would be my analysis, and I'm keen for your expertise, where Trump has obviously been close to Netanyahu and his own objectives, but has also reportedly described Netanyahu as, insert expletive here, crazy. So it's difficult to gauge how these two men actually get on.
I think they do get on. I mean, I think, Trump recognises Netanyahu as a strong leader. Trump likes strong leaders. They've had a bit of a verbal bashing on the phone, but I think they'll come to grips with that. The trouble for Netanyahu is that he's arriving in Washington at a time when President Trump is literally wondering where on earth to go next. Yeah. He's got a number of options in front of him. None of them look pretty good. Escalation is one of them. Well, that's not going to be good news for America. The other one is to just increase the sort of economic blockade of Iran. That would work. The other one is just to say enough's enough and I'm going to leave. Of course, Netanyahu will do his own screaming and shouting if he hears that from Trump, because it's very much in his interest, and he says in the interest of Israel and Israel's security, to keep going and to try the best to get rid of the regime, the new regime, if you like, in Tehran, which, of course, is pretty unlikely, as we have seen. The Iranian regime seems to have tremendous resilience and probably will not fold as Netanyahu would like.
Michael, it's been a pleasure to speak to you this morning. Thank you for running us through so many important stories. It's good to have you on.
Pleasure.
Thank you. That's Michael Evans, former defence editor at The Times, and part of the backdrop of today's meeting between Andy Burnham and President Zelenskyy of Ukraine is that Zelenskyy himself is due to visit Washington in the not too distant future, and so perhaps it's about briefing and brainstorming ahead of that particular encounter with the ever so difficult to predict President Trump.